I think when I first started out in the dollar films, critics of that time were saying, well, who's this upstart and what's he doing in this? How dare these Italians make an American Western film? And then when I started directing films, people are going, we're not sure we accept him as an actor. What's he doing now? He's going to direct films.
Clint Eastwood rose to fame writing tirelessly in more than 18 westerns. Amid desolate and arduous deserts, treacherous rivers, and breathtaking landscapes. Success did not come easy for Eastwood. In late 1954, he made his debut on the big screen.
My very first role, it was in a film called Tarantula. It's a very exciting film. It was either that or it was The Revenge of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, one of those two. They were both very good films, though. Highly rated.
From then on, he appeared in small roles in various films.
So I just kind of stumbled through the 50s. At the end of the 50s, I got a test for a CBS hour show called Rawhide.
Rawhide, a TV series about the adventures of cowboys on a cattle drive across the country.
Hit 'em up! Move 'em out!
The producers were looking for a co-star to accompany well-known actor Eric Fleming, and Eastwood is chosen for the role of Rowdy Yates.
Oh, I mean, I saw him in, in Rawhide, and he's a cool guy then, and he's a cool guy now.
Rawhide immediately becomes a big hit and remains on the air for 7 years.
I was employed and actually making a living as an actor. That was kind of like a dream for me.
Until Fleming tragically drowns in a river during the filming of the movie High Jungle in Peru. After 7 long years herding cattle on TV, Clint Eastwood makes a name for himself with the so-called spaghetti westerns by Italian director Sergio Leone. The year is 1964, and the unheralded director decides to make A Fistful of Dollars, a tribute to Yojimbo, a film by Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. He dreamed of casting actors like Henry Fonda or Charles Bronson.
Sergio wanted me to play the bad guy. My agent said, you can't play the bad guy in a film with Sergio Leone. So Sergio said, okay, but maybe you can help me get an actor for the lead role. So I said, you're not going to get a star, but there is an actor in television who is perfect for it. He's tall, he's blonde, he's a friend of mine, I can arrange a meeting.
My agent asked me if I wanted to go to Italy and make a Western, a remake of a Japanese film. And I said, no, I'm doing a Western now, and it's on TV every week. I said, and we have a little hiatus, and I'd just like to have a few days off. They asked me to read a script as a favor to the head of William Morrison in Rome. And so I read the script, and I read it very negative. I said, no, this is gonna be a piece of crap. And I read it, and I said, hey, this is Yojimbo.
Yojimbo, portrayed by the great actor Toshiro Mifune, is an imposing and indolent samurai who sells himself to the highest bidder.
I was a big fan of Kurosawa's Yojimbo. At the time I saw that, I thought that would make a great Western, but nobody would have nerve enough to do it. And I thought, gee, maybe I should do that. I've never been to Italy. I've never been to Spain, and where we've done a lot of the filming, so I went over there. And it was a very small picture, but very stylized, and Sergio was great for picking faces.
The genre of spaghetti westerns and a new movie star are born. With a gun and a fistful of dollars, Sergio Leone breaks the stereotype of the mythical western where only the good guys fight the bad guys.
And Sergio going to Europe gave me another outlook at our own genre of the West, which we'd previously only looked at through the eyes of John Ford and Hawks and Anthony Mann and John Sturges and all these wonderful directors.
Violence, dark humor, and always more action than dialogue were Leone's signature trademarks Eastwood personified in the various characters he embodied throughout his career. A Fistful of Dollars is followed by for a few dollars more. Clint Eastwood becomes a recognizable actor in Europe, but his dream is to make it in Hollywood, and neither of the two films have been shown in his country. Disappointed, he turns down the offer for the third film in the trilogy, forcing the director to fly to Los Angeles and make him an offer he could not refuse. This is how Leone, Eastwood, and the magnificent music of Ennio Morricone create The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of the greatest westerns of all time. In the trilogy, Clint Eastwood portrays the same character, but with 3 different nicknames. All 3 are bounty hunters and expert marksmen who will do just about anything in pursuit of their own profit.
I don't think the West was certainly as glamorous as it's been portrayed in films for many years. It's not fashionable or beautiful or admirable to take up a gun and to live your life that way. Every director I've ever worked for has been an inspiration. I'd say Don Siegel very much.
With him, my career took another jump in another direction. He encouraged me to reach out as an actor, and he encouraged me to direct films.
Don Siegel established himself as a director after winning 2 Oscars for directing a couple of short films in the mid-1940s. He worked with the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age, including Ronald Reagan in his last film, The Killers. An expert in producing low-budget films, Siegel directed the popular Riot in Cell Block 11, a movie with social overtones, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a classic horror film that continues to inspire filmmakers today. Before Dirty Harry, Eastwood's first collaboration with director Don Siegel catapults him into mainstream America. Coogan's Bluff. Walt Coogan, a small-town Arizona sheriff, travels to New York City to extradite an escaped murderer. However, the fugitive has been hospitalized for an attempted overdose on LSD and cannot be released. In the Big Apple, Deputy Sheriff Walt Coogan has trouble fitting in and gets frustrated by the legal hoops he has to jump through, so he decides to take the law into his own hands. Coogan talks the hospital attendants into handing over the escaped criminal and walks out the front door. On the way to the airport, the fugitive manages to escape, only to once again be apprehended by Sheriff Coogan and returned to prison in Arizona. Sheriff Coogan is the missing link between the man with no name in the Italian spaghetti westerns and the bad-tempered California cop, Dirty Harry. The second and least notable of the collaborations between Siegel and Eastwood is Two Mules for Sister Sarah, a western in which Clint saves a prostitute disguised as a nun from an attack by evildoers. A year later, they work together on The Beguiled, a dark sexual and psychological drama set in 1864 during the Civil War. Siegel's most intimate film, with a brilliant performance by Eastwood, and one of the few times during his entire filmography that the actor dies on camera. In 2017, Sofia Coppola remakes The Beguiled, starring amazing actresses, along with actor Colin Farrell in the role of John McBurney.
Production designer of the film, Ann Ross, told me years ago, you have to see this movie, The Beguiled, that Clint Eastwood and Don Siegel made. I would never do someone else's film. But then I saw it and it just stayed in my mind, and I thought, oh, I'd really love to tell the same story, but now from the women characters' point of view.
Encouraged to dabble in directing by Don Siegel, Eastwood takes on the challenge in Play Misty for Me, his first directing job.
When I first started, I did a very small picture for probably a direct cost of $725,000 at Play Misty for me, and the only way I could get the picture made and me direct is to be in it.
And I started out, and then eventually I just sort of developed a little system in the brain of switching back and forth. It's not the easiest thing. It's much easier to do one or the other. As I go on, I'll probably direct more than I act. That's my plan anyway.
Universal Studios did not pay him any more than what he was earning to act, but with total freedom during the filming, Eastwood's directorial debut manages to impress critics. Satisfied with the result, Siegel and Eastwood begin to shape a character that would make history, Harold Francis Callahan, better known as Dirty Harry, marking their fourth film collaboration.
A tenacious police officer who wanted to fight against the political bureaucracy, all for the defense of the victim. There wasn't too many pictures being made that concerned the victims of violent crime.
It was an idea that was a little ahead of its time.
The tough urban cop from the big city successfully replaces the cowboy on horseback from the previous decade. Dirty Harry cements Clint Eastwood as a Hollywood luminary. Considered a pioneer in the action movie genre, Harry Callahan, a former New York City inspector, is a loose cannon with a hard edge, determined to wipe out hippies, thugs, and other dissidents swarming the streets of San Francisco. The film is criticized not only for its excessive violence, but for glorifying a cop adept at making his own laws, accusing Eastwood and his character Callahan of being immoral fascists. Nonetheless, Dirty Harry was a box office success that gave way to 4 sequels.
We approached it first as an exciting detective story and as a fantasy role. Point a .44 Magnum at someone and say, you feel lucky.
Well, do you, punk?
But the most famous of all Harry Callahan's lines comes from the movie Sudden Impact, directed by and starring Clint Eastwood.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Even beyond his memorable one-liners, Eastwood said so much more with his steely gaze. High Plains Drifter was the first cowboy movie directed by Clint Eastwood, while at the same time dipping his toe in the horror genre. The outlaw, embodied by the menacing Eastwood, is the brother of the lynched and murdered mayor. However, Clint Eastwood leads the audience to believe that the outlaw is not the brother, but instead the ghost of the slain mayor, a merciless angel, not only seeking revenge against the murderers, but also those who witnessed his brother's death.
In the 70s wasn't a big time for Westerns as far as the Hollywood trend is concerned, but it was a good time for me.
The outlaw Josie Wales, one of the most memorable Westerns in the genre's history.
Well, I wanted the treatment of the Native American to have more than just the cliche that had been presented in the past, where you have the Indian treated as a very stoic personality without much sense of humor. And this one was the first story I'd read where they were treated with humor.
Despite the fugitive's preference to be alone, Josie Wales is joined by diverse characters while on the run. After finding refuge on an abandoned ranch, he makes peace with himself and decides to settle down. No longer the renegade and vengeful cowboy, instead, a member of an unconventional family, a reflection of the American small-town way of life. Philip Kaufman directs the film until Eastwood, frustrated by the director's meticulous search for the perfect take, dismisses him from the production and assumes the directorial duties. The expulsion of director Philip Kaufman compels the Directors Guild of America to establish the Eastwood Rule. Almost a decade later, that same rule makes it impossible for Clint Eastwood to expel director Richard Tuggle during the filming of Tightrope. And, although Eastwood takes over and directs many of the scenes, Tuggle remains on set and his name appears on the film's credits. Ironically, 30 years later, that same Directors Guild honored Eastwood with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his illustrious cinematographic career. Pale Rider, directed by and starring Clint Eastwood, is the highest-grossing Western of the 80s. The film's title, Pale Rider, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, coupled with the biblical readings and the preacher's collar, give the picture a religious and supernatural twist. Unlike Eastwood's 1973 Western High Plains Drifter, in Pale Rider the audience is left to draw their own conclusions and determine if the stranger on a star-dappled gray horse is real or just a nameless apparition.
Regardless of what nationality or what country you're in, it's the same thing always. It's the mothers sending and loved ones sending their sons and husbands off to war with a great possibility they will not return.
In 1968, Eastwood stars in Where Eagles Dare, an adaptation of the book by writer Alistair MacLean, the same creator of the hit The Guns of Navarone, in which German Nazis are massacred with machine guns without ever spilling a drop of blood. At the end of the 60s, the counterculture had gained ground, and in Where Eagles Dare, the violence is explicit, as Clint Eastwood kills more people than in any of his westerns. In the cast, MGM pairs Richard Burton, in the twilight of his career, and a youthful Eastwood with the splendid actresses Ingrid Pitt and Mary Ure. 5 British agents and 1 American, played by Eastwood, disguised as Nazis, raid a castle in the rugged Bavarian mountains and rescue a U.S. Army brigadier general detained by the Germans. To this day, the film continues to stand out for its stunning locations, frenetic pace, and one of the greatest scenes ever filmed in the Alps. Where Eagles Dare was a box office hit and widely considered a cinematic masterpiece. So much so, no one to date has dared to remake the iconic film. Years later, Clint Eastwood surprises Hollywood by releasing 2 films about the same battle, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima.
When I went to Iwo Jima the first time, I stood on the beach and I was very, very moved about being on the beach where all those Marines would come up ashore, much like you would be at Normandy. The Flags of Our Fathers was sort of a detective story for James Bradley, finding out how his father, what his life was like during the war.
Through the eyes of his son, Eastwood tells the story of John Doc Bradley and 2 other soldiers, all 3 survivors of the Pacific War and present in the famous photograph of 6 valiant soldiers raising an American flag on Suribachi Rock on Iwo Jima. Upon their return from the war, the U.S. government, with no funds to continue fighting in the war, glorifies the 3 soldiers and uses them in a national tour to sell war bonds. The patriotic propaganda of an indelible photograph manages to influence an entire country and raise $26 million to continue their war efforts. Clint Eastwood, labeled a conservative, briefly joins the ranks of liberals by narrating between the lines the tragic story of one surviving soldier, Corporal Hayes, a Native American Marine who was victimized and exploited by the military upon his return from the Pacific Campaign.
Letters from Iwo Jima was a detective story for me to find out exactly what the other side was like. It was just a hunch. When you get an idea like that and you say, okay, I'm going to go off and do this from the Japanese point of view, everybody looked at me like I was kind of nuts. Why would you do that? You've already done the American point of view.
Undeterred by the doubters, Eastwood goes ahead with the project and with the help of translators, directs an all-Japanese cast headlined by Ken Watanabe as General Kuribayashi.
The amount of conflict he had to overcome among his officers. When he got there, they resented him for doing this whole modern idea of tunneling through the
the island, they wanted to fight in a more conventional way.
The film recounts the honorable Japanese perspective in the gruesome battle. Eastwood illustrates the enormous pressure soldiers felt when facing imminent death. Through intense aerial shots combined with striking close-ups, the realization is that no soldier on either side wanted to be on that desolate island.
But it also shows the futility of it all, the futility of war in general and the futility of that war in particular.
That year, Letters from Iwo Jima, the Japanese language film, is nominated for 4 Academy Awards, winning the award for Best Sound Editing. Steven Spielberg and Eastwood are the producers of both World War II films. Their relationship goes back many years, when in 1985, Steven Spielberg invites him to direct an episode of the television series Amazing Stories. In accepting the invitation, Eastwood joins the likes of Scorsese, Robert Zemeckis, and Joe Dante. In May 2013, Warner Brothers announces Steven Spielberg as a director of American Sniper, a film based on the life of Chris Kyle, a rodeo rider who joins the Marines for the love of his country. Disagreeing with the film's budget, Spielberg withdrew from the production, giving way to Clint Eastwood to assume the director's chair. Bradley Cooper stars as Chris Kyle, dubbed the Legend, for setting the record for most sniper kills. Chris takes part in 4 different missions in Iraq. Consumed with the war, each time he returns home, he finds it impossible to be fully present. Once again, Eastwood raises controversy among liberals who declare it unacceptable to glorify a lethal assassin. Ironically, the Legend doesn't die on the battlefield, but is killed by a disturbed fellow veteran on a shooting range in Texas.
The responsibility to play a human being when his family's still alive and it's so fresh was a huge sort of endeavor and something that I knew was going to be important for all of them.
With only a $60 million budget, American Sniper grosses more than $517 million worldwide, surpassing Saving Private Ryan as the highest-grossing war movie of all time. Nominated for 6 Oscars, American Sniper wins in the Best Sound Editing category, and Bradley Cooper receives his 3rd consecutive nomination for Best Actor. In addition to cinema, Eastwood has 2 great passions in life: golf and music.
I think I've always liked to be a musician because unlike an actor where you have to use your body and your face, the instrument, a musician doesn't have to worry about all that. It's what he transmits through the instrument.
At 16, he played the piano in exchange for a couple of slices of pizza and a beer at the Omar Club in downtown Oakland. At 39, he stars in Paint Your Wagon, the first and only musical of his entire career. Eastwood's frustration with the film's overblown budget and long delays fueled his desire to become a director. Amid the California gold rush, Pardner, a prospector for the coveted metal, buys and shares a wife with Ben Rumson, a Michigan farmer, and they turn an abandoned mine into a vibrant town. However, the film exceeded its budget even before filming began, prompting Eastwood to declare the production taught him how not to make a movie. Later that year, Eastwood and longtime financial advisor Irving Leonard decided to launch the production company Malpaso, beginning his career as an independent filmmaker.
I love westerns and I love cop dramas, but I'd hate to have been noted for only that, and when I started branching out the Bronco Billy and a lot of other types of films, it gave me a chance to show off other aspects.
Bronco Billy, a drama disguised as a comedy set in America's Wild West. Bronco Billy and his Wild West circus shows survive by wandering and performing from town to town. Eastwood enjoys parodying the same characters that he was known for in westerns. When Bronco Billy needs a new tent, it's made by the madmen in an insane asylum with flags of the United States of America. An auteur's film that critics lauded, but audiences did not.
There's always some lady alone at the bar.
Yeah, and you always
Barroom
let her know
Buddies,
just
a
who
song
you
off Bronco Billy's soundtrack, performed with Merle Haggard, became #1 and overnight Eastwood topped Billboard's country music chart. The same year, he sings Here's to You with Ray Charles in the movie Any Which Way You Can. And although the song was not a hit, the soundtrack reached 5th place on the country music chart. Honky Tonk Man, another one of director Clint Eastwood's passion projects. At the age of 19, Eastwood is chopping wood deep in the Oregon forest. One afternoon, he walks into a bar and finds swing legend Bob Wills playing and instantly falls in love with country music. Honky Tonk Man tells the story of Red Stovall, an alcoholic country singer with tuberculosis who makes a living playing in dive bars. Red's dream is to get sober and audition for the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. Red makes the trip to Nashville from Oklahoma, accompanied by his nephew in the film, played by his son Kyle Eastwood, making his big screen debut.
I was born when the Depression started, and we moved all the time. We lived in town 6 months.
Wow.
And moved. We lived in Sacramento 6 months, Reading 6 months, back to Sacramento, and it was that kind of time.
In 1986, Martin Scorsese produced The Blues, a series for PBS. He invited several directors to participate, including Eastwood. In the documentary entitled Piano Blues, Clint Eastwood interviews the best jazz, blues, and African-American pianists. Once again, Ray Charles steals the show by interpreting the repertoires of the jazz greats, in addition to giving Eastwood a master piano lesson. Jazz composer and musician Lenny Niehaus meets Clint Eastwood in the Army, and from that moment on, they share a love of jazz. Niehaus scores many of Eastwood's films, but his mastery stands out in Bird, a biopic about the life of saxophonist Charlie Bird Parker. Bird intertwines Eastwood in Niehaus's passion of jazz with Forrest Whitaker's transcendental performance. The actor immersed himself in the life of the talented musician and was rewarded by winning Best Actor at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival.
It was probably the first time I really got to try to test myself as an artist, as an actor, and we worked very closely. I just remember that everything always seemed to come together smoothly, with a great sense of grace and style, and everything flowed beautifully.
Later that year, Eastwood again comes to the rescue of jazz greats when he convinces Warner Brothers to fund the production of an independent documentary, Thelonious Monk, Straight No Chaser, about the life of the creator of bebop and one of the greatest jazz pianists of all time. Lenny Niehaus and the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band organized Eastwood After Hours, where great artists performed music from his films as a tribute to his lifelong love of jazz. Whether as an actor, director, producer, or musician, Clint Eastwood is a chip off the old block. No Hollywood director or actor has enjoyed such a long and successful career in film as Clint Eastwood. An iconic voice in the history of American cinema, a voice that does not ever scream, "Action!"
I went to the White House, I think it was Gerald Ford, and I saw these Secret Service guys, and they'd sit there with a mic, and a thing, and they were talking while everybody else was talking, but you never heard them. I mean, you can give the instructions, you don't have to do it out of a loudspeaker. I've always done that ever since.
16 years after the outlaw Josie Wales, Clint Eastwood dismounts from his horse, throws out his cowboy hat, and says goodbye to the genre that catapulted him to stardom.
Rolling, action. Okay.
He does it with an anti-Western that has all the elements of a good cowboy. Unforgiven is not just a Western. It is a moral reflection on the genre.
It seemed important for me to tell a story where violence was not necessarily a beautiful, courageous, glamorous aspect of life.
Clint Eastwood stars as Willie Money. Morgan Freeman is Ned Logan, his longtime partner in crime. Both men have lost their aim and zeal for killing. Gene Hackman portrays the evil and hated sheriff Little Bill Daggett, and Richard Harris in an unforgettable performance as English Bob. The following year, Eastwood receives his first 2 Oscars in the categories of Best Picture and Best Director, and Gene Hackman wins the Academy Award for the Best Supporting Actor.
I had to talk a lot of people into it. Gene Hackman was going through a period where he didn't want to do anything violent.
I wasn't terribly interested in it because I thought it was too violent and I didn't know what to do with it.
I said, well, but this story is sort of anti that. It tells about, the feelings that can happen when you're indulged in violence like that.
I knew that Clint was trying to do something serious, make some kind of comment about violence in Westerns, and I think he's done that.
Eastwood bids farewell to the genre with gusto. Unforgiven, with a budget of $14.4 million, generates $159.2 million at the box office. In a perfect world, a well-known Hollywood legend and a budding movie star collide. Having both won Academy Awards for directing, the duo team up for this movie. Kevin Costner portrays the villain of the film after playing the hero in most of his movies. The film tells the story of escaped convict Robert Butch Hayes, who kidnaps a young child to aid his escape. While on the run from the authorities, he cultivates a special bond with the young boy and develops a father-son relationship he never had. Clint Eastwood as the righteous Texas Ranger Red Garnet, actress Laura Dern as criminologist Sally Gerber, and T.J. Lowther in the role of Philip Buzz Perry, the 8-year-old hostage on this wild adventure. Eastwood's swift and efficient directing style clashes with Costner's plodding perfectionism.
This I learned from Don Siegel, is that I'm always trying for it in the first take. Just see what happens. A lot of directors want to come in and rehearse it. By the time you get to doing it, they're all bored with it.
After a disagreement on the set, Kevin Costner stormed off. Unfazed, Eastwood finished the scene with his stunt double. Eventually, filming resumed without more mishaps, and the film is released, generating profits of more than $100 million. Outstanding actresses were considered for the role of Francesca in The Bridges of Madison County. Meryl Streep is eventually chosen for the role and subsequently receives her 10th Academy Awards nomination.
There was something about her that was about her reserve that attracted me. This character, Francesca, really from a person in my childhood, and her name was Nucci. She was married to a GI. Her little boy was named Charles Jr. They called him Chuck. And she said, Chucky, take out the garbage.
Francesca Johnson is a jaded housewife of Italian origin in a small town in Ohio. She meets a photojournalist who changes her life without ever changing it. Francesca falls in love like a schoolgirl, causing a difficult dilemma. Her husband is a good man and doesn't deserve to have his wife run off with photographer Robert Kincaid, played by Clint Eastwood. Without guns blazing or punches thrown, Eastwood achieves net earnings of more than $270 million with this heartfelt love story. Mystic River. A somber and tragic drama starring Kevin Bacon as the honest detective, Sean Penn as the ex-con running a convenience store, and Tim Robbins, the haunted victim of child abuse, give extraordinary performances with Eastwood's directorial guidance.
I've always been kind of fascinated of people's, where they steal somebody's life and the innocence of children.
Mystic River repeatedly relives the ill-fated day in Boston when a car with two sexual abusers kidnapped a child playing hockey in the streets with his best friends, robbing him of his innocence forever. Tim Robbins' performance, teeming with the pain from an incurable trauma, and Sean Penn's heartbreaking scream of agony when finding the body of his murdered daughter, speak louder than words. Nominated for 6 Academy Awards, Sean Penn and Tim Robbins take the coveted Oscar as Best Actors in their categories. $1 Million Baby.
It was a great script that had 3 great roles. These characters I knew would connect with anybody with a beating heart.
Clint Eastwood as the reclusive and religious Frankie Dunn, a former trainer, now on the fringes of the boxing world. Morgan Freeman plays Eddie Scrap Iron Dupree, Frankie Dunn's only remaining friend. And Hilary Swank embodies Maggie Fitzgerald, a strong-willed woman eager to find someone who believes in her. The film received 7 Academy Award nominations. That year, the fight for Best Picture and Best Director was between 2 legendary Hollywood directors. Eastwood's team wins both statuettes, and Hilary Swank wins the Oscar for Best Actress.
I grew up in a trailer park, and I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and I wanted out. I wanted to live my dream, and I feel so blessed and so thankful to be able to be living my dream.
At the age of 74, Clint Eastwood becomes the oldest director to win an Oscar. Gran Torino. In 2008, and still without an Oscar for Best Actor, Clint Eastwood receives the best reviews of his distinguished career, but is inexplicably shut out by the Academy. In his extraordinary film, The Man with No Name, Dirty Harry, and William Money are all 3 embodied in Korean War veteran Walt Kowalski. A widower and retired mechanic, Walt finds it hard to accept the multitude of immigrants migrating to his neighborhood.
Gran Torino came along. It seemed like an interesting part. It was a man my age, but I don't know how many great roles there are for a guy who's 38. And you just never say never.
His prized possession, a 1972 Gran Torino he himself assembled and cares for with great passion. After furiously banishing his Asian neighbors from his backyard, Walt evolves and eventually befriends the Hmong family, who are originally from Laos. In a final act of love, Clint Eastwood pays one last homage to the solitary hero present throughout his filmography.
One good thing about getting into your 7th decade of life is, what the hell can they do to you? Nothing.
Thank you. There you go. How about that? I think it's fabulous.
It's fabulous.
Fantastic.
You take it.
All right, yes, sir.
I'm just going to step back. And
All right. That's the longest Clint Eastwood has talked to an actor in over 40 films.
I respond very well to the one or two take director.
Really cutting in camera is basically what Clint does.
I have never seen a director command so much respect. He is so gracious and thoughtful and connected to every single person.
El trabajo con él es una cosa sumamente orgánica.
Well, he's truthful, he's honest, he's sensible in the sense of sensibility.
He is involved in every part of the filmmaking, be it the writing, the cinematography, the editing. He writes his musical scores.
You know, when everyone else his age ain't tap dancing anymore, he's still tap dancing.
Sexy, he's talented, he's just, I guess it's just everything, yeah.
I'm not trying to be cooler than him, that's too much of a challenge.
Well, I think the approval of the audience has been very, very important in my life. This comes out of a lot of the small films I've made, the Honky Tonk Mans and the Bronco Billies and Like a Big Isle, and a lot of films that where I thought I took chances. It was something I wasn't sure what the public would like, but I was figuring, what the hell, you got to take a swing at it.
Thank you very much.
Eastwood was not afraid of taking chances, and throughout his career took risks with films that contributed to making him a legend. The Gauntlet tells the story of a down-and-out cop who falls in love with a prostitute after rescuing her from danger. Eastwood and Sandra Lott, charismatic couple on screen, not so much in real life. He has the luxury of turning down roles that many actors dream of, and even mocks British Agent 007 in the Eiger Sanction. He was advised not to make a film co-starring an orangutan, but Eastwood didn't listen and produces one of his highest-grossing films, so successful that it even had a sequel. Heartbreak Ridge. Eastwood is accused of justifying the invasion of Grenada and glorifying the army in the Reagan era. Nevertheless, he directs and courageously shows the paradoxes of war. In White Hunter, Black Heart, Eastwood tells the story of famous director John Huston, disguised as John Wilson. One of his best thought-out films, it chronicles the transformation of a cocky director capable of compromising an expensive film shoot to satisfy his obsession with hunting an elephant. If it is difficult for an actor to become a character, it is even more difficult to become a legend like Hollywood director John Huston.
Acting is an ensemble art form. That's what it's all about, is interacting with other people and making scenes come to life like they would in real life, as near to real life as possible.
A young Eastwood is passed over for many roles because of his squinty eyes, thin lips, and big Adam's apple. These supposed defects, instead of hindering his career, motivate him to turn them into his acting trademarks.
If you don't really love it, if you just like it, then you shouldn't do it. If you love it, then you should give it a try.
Eastwood graces the silver screen with rookie and experienced actors alike. Sergeant Kelly, along with Sergeant Crapgame, dare to steal a Nazi treasure in the middle of World War II. Pulowski, a tough and temperamental veteran detective, unwillingly teams with David Ackerman, an insecure rookie cop. After failing to save Kennedy in Dallas, undercover agent Frank Horrigan plays cat and mouse with Mitch Leary, a psychopath who threatens to assassinate the president. 4 heroic retired astronauts return to space for one last adventure. The performance of the all-star cast, along with captivating special effects, overshadow the cliched script. He also directed other notable stars in cinema. Changeling is a battle of words and determination fought by a heroine who inspired Eastwood to direct the film. A brilliant actor playing an iconic leader in a film that incites solidarity and forgiveness.
He's played presidents before, though. He played a president of the United States, and he's played God. There's really not much you could say about someone who can play all those roles.
Once again, the director delves into the supernatural, narrating simultaneously what happens to a French journalist, an English boy who loses his twin brother, and an American psychic who communicates with the dead. Leonardo DiCaprio in the role of J. Edgar, an autobiographical film that takes place over 7 decades. Eastwood accentuates the public image and prejudice against minorities of the immensely repressed J. Edgar Hoover.
And he was an interesting guy, kind of a mystery guy. Not too many people knew too much about him except on the surface.
What could have been a tragedy turned Sully into a hero when he lands an Airbus A320 into the Hudson River with no casualties.
Ran for office in Carmel because I live there and I'm concerned with local issues, but I'm not interested in anything larger than that. I've still got a few flicks to make in my lifetime too, so I don't want to do anything that would preclude that.
It is impossible to recount in its entirety the long, prolific life and astounding filmography of Clint Eastwood. Throughout his career, Eastwood has reaped numerous triumphs while directing more than 40 films, acting in over 70 movies, collecting over 150 awards, including 4 Oscars. Clint Eastwood has not only secured his place in Hollywood's history, but also in the renowned history of world cinema. Bravo!
You take and you divide a career like a game of golf. You have the front 9 and then you have the back 9. So I'm starting the back 9, and you know, sometimes if you pay attention to your mistakes on the front 9, you can even score better in the back 9. Just keep your eye on the ball and follow through.